Imagine finding a tiny piece of bone in a cave. Not a skull, not a full skeleton, not even enough to picture a face. Just a fragment from a finger. For most of history, that would have been almost useless. A small, broken piece of someone who lived and died tens of thousands of years ago. But when scientists studied the DNA inside that bone, they realized something impossible. It did not belong to a modern human. It did not belong to a Neanderthal. It belonged to an entirely different group of ancient humans that no one knew existed. They became known as the Denisovans, named after Denisova Cave in Siberia, where the bone was found. And here's the strange part. We did not discover them by seeing what they looked like. We discovered them like a ghost hidden in genetic code. Their bones were almost gone. Their faces were unknown. Their cities, stories, tools, and voices had disappeared. But a trace of their DNA remained. And that trace was enough to prove that Earth was once shared by more than one kind of human. Modern humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, different branches of the same ancient family, walking through the same cold landscapes, sometimes meeting, sometimes avoiding each other, and sometimes even having children together, which means some people alive today still carry Denisovan ancestry inside them. A vanished human species is not completely vanished. It is still here, not in ruins, not in monuments, not in books, but quietly, inside living people. In 1901, divers discovered a strange lump of corroded bronze inside an ancient shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera. At first, it looked like junk, a ruined piece of metal that had spent centuries underwater. But hidden inside were gears. Not one or two simple gears, dozens of them. Tiny bronze wheels with carefully cut teeth, arranged in a machine so advanced that it seemed completely out of place in the ancient world. This was not a weapon. It was not jewelry. It was not a statue. IT was a calculator. More specifically, it was an ancient machine designed to track the movements of the sun, moon, and possibly planets across the sky. A person could turn a handle, and the universe would move. The machine could predict eclipses, track calendars, and model astronomical cycles that took years to complete. And the mind-bending part is not just that it existed. It is that nothing this mechanically complex appears again in history for a very long time. It is almost like finding a wristwatch inside a Roman tomb. Not because timekeeping was impossible, but because the craftsmanship feels centuries ahead of where we expect it to be. The Antikythera Mechanism reminds us that history is not a straight line. Knowledge can rise, it can disappear, it can sink to the bottom of the sea. And sometimes, after 2,000 years in darkness, a broken machine can whisper something unsettling. The ancient world was smarter than we thought. For a long time, the story of civilization sounded simple. First, humans learned to farm. Then they built villages. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. And eventually, people had enough free time to build temples. Food first, religion later. That was the accepted order of history. But then archaeologists uncovered Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. Buried beneath the earth were massive stone pillars arranged in giant circles. Some were carved with animals like foxes, snakes, birds, and creatures from a forgotten symbolic world. The site was incredibly old. Older than Stonehenge. Older than the pyramids. So old that it completely disrupted the timeline historians believed in. Because the people who built it were not supposed to be doing this yet. They were not supposed to be organizing massive labor projects. They were not supposed to be carving giant pillars. They were not supposed to be building ceremonial spaces before fully developed farming societies existed. And yet, there it was. A temple-like complex from a world that should have been too early for temples. Göbekli Tepe suggests something strange. Maybe civilization did not begin because people settled down to farm. Maybe gathering around sacred places helped create civilization in the first place. Maybe belief came before cities. Maybe stories, rituals, and shared mysteries pulled people together before crops did. And if that is true, then civilization may not have started with bread. It may have started with wonder. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in the year 79, it buried entire Roman towns beneath ash, fire, and stone. Pompeii became famous for the bodies frozen in their final moments. But nearby Herculaneum held another kind of ghost, a library. Inside a wealthy Roman villa, hundreds of scrolls were caught in the eruption. The intense heat did not completely destroy them. Instead, it carbonized them, turning them into fragile black cylinders. They looked like pieces of charcoal. For centuries, people knew there might be writing hidden inside them. Ancient philosophy, lost books, voices from Rome that had not been heard in nearly 2,000 years. But there was a problem. If anyone tried to unroll the scrolls, they would crumble apart. The words were trapped inside the very thing that preserved them. Then modern technology changed everything. Researchers began using advanced scanning systems and artificial intelligence to virtually unwrap the scrolls without physically opening them. The computers searched through microscopic layers, detecting tiny traces of ancient ink hidden inside the burned papyrus. And slowly, words began to appear again. Think about that for a moment. A volcano buried a library. Fire turned its books into charcoal. 2,000 years passed. And then machines learned how to read what human hands could no longer touch. It sounds almost impossible, but it is real. And somewhere inside those blackened scrolls, there may still be books no one has read since ancient Rome was alive, waiting silently inside volcanic ash. Modern concrete is everywhere: bridges, buildings, sidewalks, highways. But eventually it cracks. Water seeps inside. Steel begins to rust. Structures weaken. And after only decades, things that once looked permanent begin falling apart. Then you look at ancient Rome. Roman harbors still stand. Aqueducts still survive. The Pantheon still towers over the city after nearly 2,000 years. For a long time, scientists wondered how Roman concrete lasted so much longer than ours. Then researchers noticed something strange. Inside Roman concrete were tiny white chunks that many people assumed were simply mistakes from poor mixing. But they were not mistakes. Those white pieces contained lime, and researchers believe they may have helped the concrete repair itself over time. When cracks formed, water could react with the lime and create new minerals that slowly filled the cracks back in. In other words, the concrete could partially heal itself. A wall would crack, and then quietly begin repairing the damage. And that is what makes the discovery so strange. The imperfections were not weaknesses. They were part of the secret. It is a reminder that ancient engineering was not always primitive. Sometimes it was practical in ways we are only beginning to understand again. The Romans did not have modern chemistry labs. But somehow, they created stone that could almost behave like living tissue. Cracked, but not finished. If you stand on the coast of Britain today and look across the North Sea, it feels permanent. Water stretches toward the horizon, separating Britain from mainland Europe like a natural barrier that has always existed. But thousands of years ago, that sea was not sea at all. There was land there, a massive landscape of forests, rivers, marshes, hills, and open plains where people hunted animals, built fires, and walked between regions that are now completely separated by water. Today, scientists call this lost world Doggerland. It once connected Britain to Europe like a giant land bridge. People may have lived entire lives there without realizing their homeland would one day disappear beneath the ocean. Then the Ice Age slowly ended. Glaciers melted, sea levels rose, rivers overflowed, coastlines retreated farther and farther inland. Over generations, the world around them slowly drowned. What had once been forests became wetlands. Wetlands became islands. And eventually, even the islands vanished beneath the sea. Some researchers also believe a massive tsunami may have struck parts of Doggerland after an underwater landslide near Norway. But even without a giant wave, the rising ocean alone was enough to erase the landscape. And that is the unsettling part. Doggerland is not mythology. It is not Atlantis. It was a real place where real people once lived. Today, fishing boats move across the North Sea without realizing they are floating above an ancient world. A drowned country lies beneath the water, buried forests, ancient rivers, human tools, lost campsites, an entire landscape sleeping quietly under the sea. When people hear the word Stone Age, they usually imagine humans, caves, fire, primitive tools, the beginning of civilization. But deep in Brazil, archaeologists discovered something that made the idea much stranger. Monkeys had their own stone tools. Capuchin monkeys use rocks to crack open nuts and seeds. Scientists had observed this behavior for years, watching the monkeys use stones like tiny hammers. That alone was impressive. But then researchers began digging beneath the places where the monkeys gathered, almost like archaeologists excavating an ancient human campsite. And buried in the ground, they found older stone tools. Some were hundreds of years old. Others may have been thousands. That means generation after generation of monkeys had been using tools in the same areas for an incredibly long time. The monkeys were leaving behind a kind of archaeology, not cities, not writing, not monuments, but physical evidence of learned behavior passed through time. And that is where the discovery becomes deeply strange. The Stone Age may not belong only to humans. Other animals can develop traditions. Other species can pass down skills across generations. Other minds can leave traces of their behavior buried in the earth. A monkey picks up a stone, cracks a nut, drops the tool. Years pass. Another monkey does the same thing in the same place. Then another. Then another. Until eventually, scientists dig into the ground and realize they are uncovering a history that was never human at all. A quiet Stone Age, happening beside our own. For centuries, people imagined ancient Greece as a world of pure white marble. White statues, white temples, white columns glowing beneath blue skies. It became one of the most famous visual styles in human history. Elegant, clean, timeless. But there is one problem. Ancient Greece probably did not look like that at all. Many Greek and Roman statues were originally painted in bright colors. Skin tones, colored clothing, painted eyes, decorative armor, detailed patterns. The statues were not meant to look pale and empty. They were meant to look alive. Over time, rain, sunlight, burial, cleaning, and erosion slowly stripped away most of the paint, leaving only the bare stone underneath. Later generations looked at the faded statues and assumed the whiteness was intentional. And from that misunderstanding, an entire idea of classical beauty was created. The ancient world was not colorless. In many cases, it was vivid and dramatic. Some reconstructed statues almost look shocking today because modern audiences are so used to imagining the ancient world as plain white marble. And that is what makes the discovery so strange. One of the most recognizable artistic styles in history may partly come from damage. We did not inherit Greece exactly as it once existed. We inherited Greece after the color had already disappeared, and then we mistook the fading for perfection. For most of modern history, scientists believe the first humans arrived in the Americas around 13,000 years ago. That timeline appeared in textbooks, museums, and documentaries for decades. Then researchers discovered footprints in New Mexico that quietly shattered the entire story. The footprints were preserved in ancient mud beside a long-vanished lake. Adults, teenagers, children, real human steps frozen into the ground thousands of years ago. At first glance, they seem almost ordinary. A person walking, a child running, families crossing soft earth near water. But when scientists dated the layers surrounding the prints, the results became deeply controversial. The footprints appeared to be around 23,000 years old. That would mean humans were already living in North America during the height of the Ice Age, thousands of years earlier than the traditional timeline allowed. And that changes everything. Because during that period, giant ice sheets covered huge parts of the continent. The routes people were believed to have used may not even have been open yet. So how did they get there? Did they travel along coastlines? Did they arrive in multiple waves? Were humans exploring the Americas far earlier than anyone imagined? The footprints do not answer every question, but they prove something important. Long before cities, borders, or written history, someone walked across wet ground beside an ancient lake and left behind evidence that would confuse the future for thousands of years. A few simple footprints, became one of the most important discoveries in human history. Because sometimes, the smallest traces change the biggest stories. When archaeologists opened the tomb of King Tutankhamun, they discovered gold, jewelry, statues, and treasures unlike anything the modern world had ever seen. But hidden among the artifacts was something much stranger. A dagger made from metal that should not have existed in Egypt at the time. The blade was iron. That may not sound unusual today, but during Tutankhamun's lifetime, iron was extremely rare. Egypt was still living largely in the Bronze Age. Iron weapons were not common. So where did the metal come from? Modern scientists eventually studied the dagger and found unusually high levels of nickel and cobalt inside the blade. The composition matched meteorites. The dagger was forged from metal that had fallen from space. Imagine how ancient people must have viewed it. A blade made from the sky itself. Long before modern science understood meteorites, many ancient cultures saw objects falling from the heavens as sacred or supernatural. And in a way, they were not entirely wrong. The iron inside King Tut's dagger was older than Earth's civilizations, older than kingdoms, older than pyramids. The atoms inside it were formed in violent cosmic events long before human history began. Then one day, a meteorite crashed into Earth. And centuries later, craftsmen shaped part of that fallen object into a weapon for a king. A dagger carried by a pharaoh, forged from a piece of space.